Coming to you from the mountain state of Colorado today. It's a little nippy out here. I had to go get my blanket wrap. It looks warm, but it's actually kind of windy and cold, but it is beautiful. I've just been doing a lot of thinking about the concept of pulling up stakes and moving. I don't think we've ever seen a time like this in the United States for our generations that are alive right now. It was very common, obviously, when the whole immigrant thing happened in the 1800s and into the 1900s, when we just had so many people coming into the country and moving to totally new places. But we're seeing things now that we've never seen before. It's not an exaggeration for me to say that Rich and I, every week, hear of at least someone we know, an acquaintance or a friend, a neighbor, who is pulling up stakes and moving either to another part of the state, or most of them to a different state, many of them to a totally different part of the country. The other thing that we're seeing is some new trends. People used to move primarily because of jobs. They got a job transfer, they took a new job, or they moved because of the weather. You know, they got tired of the snow, so they moved to Arizona and retired or whatever. That's still going on. However, we're seeing a lot of other new trends. We're seeing people move to be closer to family, and not because they have to, they're just choosing to. The other thing we're seeing is people move in groups now. We're seeing someone say, you know, I've been thinking about moving to Tennessee. I've been thinking about moving to Idaho. And pretty soon, within a matter of days, there are other families that are going, you know what, we're going to go too. We never used to see things like that. So we're seeing actual communities, in a sense, little communities, mini communities, pick up and move together. The main thing we're seeing here is that people are willing to risk. Now, some people are kind of fleeing. You know, it's like, I don't want to live in a red state anymore. I don't want to live in a blue state anymore, whatever. So politics can influence where they move. But overall, I think there's a lot more going on. They're willing to embrace a new adventure. Now, Rich and I have done this a number of times. Some of it was our childhoods, and so the decisions were made for us. We didn't have a part in the decision making. I was born and raised in southwestern Michigan, and when I was in the middle of 8th grade, my dad took a job in California. I have to tell you, people didn't pick up and move across the country that much in the early 60s. So it was kind of a novel thing. And I have to tell you that I didn't like it. It took me a really long time to adjust to California. Some of the things that people experience, that's one of them. You want to go home. A lot of times after you pick up and leave, you want to go home. It's kind of a normal response, really. You have a loss of familiarity, the things that you kind of took for granted, the places that you frequented, your friends, the culture of the area, the celebrations that you experienced in that culture. You want to return to that because there's nothing really familiar in the new place that you've moved to. You're also moving away many times from friends and family. That is interesting. You'll get all kinds of interesting responses if you announce that you're moving. You'll have people who are really disappointed. You'll have people who try and talk you out of it, and maybe for good reason. You have to listen to counsel and discern. So you'll kind of have a variety of responses when you announce that you're thinking of going or you're actually going. When I left Michigan in 8th grade, as I said, it was a really difficult move. It took me a long time to get used to California culture, which at that time was so different from the rest of the country. I mean, the sexual culture for 8th grade was really different. The food was different. I'd never heard the word taco. Well, wait a minute, I had, because we studied Mexico in 5th grade. But I'd never had a taco. I'd never had salsa. I'd never had pizza. So things about the culture in Michigan were very isolated. Cultures were isolated then because people didn't travel as much. So you kind of had your little niche that you lived in. And when you went across the country, you really did leave it behind and have to embrace something new. When I was 17, almost 18, my mom died, which was a really difficult time for our family. I was the oldest. And I remember we made a trip back to Michigan about 3 months after she died. And it's where she was born and where her parents were, her brother and his family, and it was still familiar with me. And I also associated California with just a lot of painful things. And I remember I really wanted to go to college back there. So I talked to my dad about it, and I said, I think I want to move back there. I want to see if I can live with my aunt, who was his sister. And it was really interesting what her response was. I thought she'd be like, oh yeah, I'd love to have Cheryl live with me while she goes to college. Well, this is what she said to my dad. She said, you know, she has to remember that when she comes back here, she gets a lot of attention. I mean, she's kind of returning and everybody's glad to see her when she comes to visit. She's kind of the center of attention. And if she comes back here to live, that's not going to be the way it is. I don't know. I'd never really thought about that, but it really made me stop and think. I didn't go. I thought it was pretty wise counsel, actually, but there was definitely an element of truth to that. I was really glad I stayed in California. That year after high school was filled with new friends, new experiences, and that continued into the following years when I met Rich and we went to school in Texas together. So Texas was another different culture. And then we ended up coming back to California, where we have lived in 3 very distinct counties. I'm up in Northern California now, near the Oregon border. I've lived in Ventura County, and I've also lived in San Luis Obispo County. So some of the things that have helped me grow in my moves that I've made, I definitely have made new friends, and I have to say that it's much easier to make friends when you move with your kids. Having kids with you really immerses you into the new place much easier than it does when you're an empty nester. It's just harder to make friends. It just takes longer. We experienced this in Redding when we moved because we didn't have kids that were under our roof. We had kids that lived here, but they hadn't lived here very long, actually, when we moved up here. So we were kind of on our own. We've been here 11 years, and I have to say the first 5 were pretty rough. We felt kind of like fish out of water. We were always kind of looking for the next place to go to. And we kind of had this mental list. Where do we want to go next? What do we want in the community? But it was interesting. We ended up in Redding because we felt a very distinct call to go there. And we listened to the call and went, but it was interesting. We doubted the call after we got here. I'm so glad we didn't pick up and leave, because the last 5 or 6 years have been so rich here. We have made deep friends. God has shown us other things that we could have never learned in other places. I'm glad we've been here for our grandkids, and we're especially thankful that we have that relationship with them and the close proximity. Some of the other things that we learned is that friends will kind of let you down. Sometimes you don't hear from people, and you think, that's so strange. I thought we were really good friends. And you can kind of feel abandoned, and you can kind of feel hurt about it. In my situation, I just chose to realize that not everyone is a good communicator. Life goes on after you leave. You feel like you're really an important part of that circle of friends or the world that you live in. And you leave, but they get up and the next day they learn to adjust to life without you and they go on. You'll be surprised. Some people that you didn't think you'd hear from will stay in touch with you. In fact, your friendship with them will grow deeper as you're apart. Other people you just don't hear from. I chose not to let it make me bitter or resentful. I just chose to accept it. I enjoy seeing those people or having contact if we do. If we don't have contact, I just enjoy the memories that we made in the past. Another story I want to tell you about is when Rich and I moved to Cambria in San Luis Obispo County. Rich had just left his corporate job and he was doing some consulting in San Luis Obispo County, and that's actually where he was born and raised. So we had some familiarity, and we also had people we knew in the county. We bought a house in Cambria in 2001. We didn't make the move there until 2009, and it was really strange. We lived in Thousand Oaks, and we had been there like over 30 years, and we just felt like God wanted us to move somewhere, and we didn't know where. Probably prayed about it for a couple years. There was just this restlessness. It wasn't wasted time. We were still very involved with people, our church and ministry and activities, and we enjoyed it, but we just knew that there was a pulling up of stakes happening, but we just weren't getting any direction from God about where to go. That was weird. He just never told us. And finally, because we had thought about moving to Cambria, we thought, would we really like it there? We thought, we don't really know if we like it there unless we actually make the move. And we finally came to the conclusion that sometimes God doesn't give you the answer, or sometimes he doesn't show you really specifically. He just tells you it's time to pull up stakes, and he kind of just says, you decide. You're free to make the decision. We came to that conclusion, and so we decided, let's move to Cambria. Let's see what it's like living there full time and not just going up there once a month to enjoy it for a few days. Let's see what it's like. So we did that. There were things we liked about it. There were things that we didn't like about it. And we were only there for a couple years, and that was okay because it really was a learning and preparation time for what was ahead for us. That's the way we choose to look at it. But we go back about once a year and visit, and we get to see people, we get to keep in touch. You know, the world is always changing. It's our nature sometimes to want to hang on really tightly to our surroundings, to the people around us, to the familiarity around us. And I just want to encourage you that there are good things to be learned in other places. There are good things to be learned about God. There are good things to be learned about yourself. If you are a child of God, you are one who walks in kingdom living. When you move to a new place, you change the atmosphere of that place in some way. You do. You break up the old and you bring some of the new with you. Think about the people in your life who have moved to your community, who you have embraced. Can you imagine what it would have been like if they would have never come? I mean, they really did have an impact on you in some way. If you are considering a move to another place, realize that you're bringing something new to that place. You're breaking up some of the old, maybe some of the hardened ground that needs to be turned over. Maybe you're going to wake up a community. Maybe you're going to bring hope to some people that don't have hope. Maybe some people are going to bring hope to you that you need. All these things are out there, and it's a time to cast fear aside and take the leap for some of you. Don't expect it to be easy. Don't expect it to go really smoothly. It might, but most likely there will be challenges along the way. I encourage you to go if you feel like God is leading you. You might be surprised at how God removes obstacles. I have have an example of that. This week I was talking to someone who's contemplating a move, and they care for her mother, who's probably getting close to 90 now. She might be 90. They were pretty sure she was going to dig in her heels. She lives with them, and they were pretty sure she was going to dig in her heels and not want to go, because she's been in this area that they currently live in for decades. Surprise, surprise. She was like, sounds good to me, let's go. It was a surprise. So I think a lot of us say, oh, there's too many red lights, never work, this will never happen. Don't be surprised if you get a green light. I have to say that I would not trade any of our experiences in the places that we've lived. They've been extremely helpful to us. They've been extremely insightful. We see people through different lenses now. I kind of feel sorry for people that just live in one place for most of their life, one area, because there's so much to be learned by living in different areas. Our son, before he married, did a lot of traveling overseas, and he lived for 3 years in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. He taught English in those countries. That experience was eye-opening for him, and moving does that to you. If you have the opportunity, bless people around you who are going, pray for them. If you come into contact with people moving to your area, embrace them, step out and invite them to your home, welcome them into your life, into your circle. Keep tabs on them. They need you. They're probably going to be lonely. There's so much opportunity here for people in the body of Christ to really reflect who He is. This is really kingdom living, everyone. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future.